Okay. All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Hillsborough TPO Intelligent Transportation Systems Committee meeting. I'm Margaret Kublins, the chair, and I have Brian Zayas next to me as the vice chair.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Achilles.
Yes, good afternoon.
So currently, we do not have a quorum, even though I'd like to go ahead and start the meeting. All right, so we'll do roll call after, so we can find it, once we have the other late arrivals that come in. In the meantime, we'd like to open the floor for public comment. Do we have any comments from the floor? By group today? Not a problem. Okay, so we are gonna, if you're following along on the agenda, we're gonna move past the review and approval of the minutes. We're gonna pass on the action items and we're gonna move on to the status reports. So we've kindly invited the Florida Department of Transportation District 7, TSMO Group, for them in order to present on the connected and autonomous vehicle technologies that are going to be supporting the ICM, which is an integrated corridor management, as well as I-4 frame, and also there may be some elements that are being deployed with the ATMS. So we've asked them in this presentation to present to us as local governments, and we're maintaining agencies. We're also very responsible for the operations of the corridors to help specifically with signal timings. And we'd like to be interested, or we are interested in learning about the instrumentation, and then open up the discussion about, okay, that's a lot of data that's going to be coming in, and how are we going to be able to use that? Because throughout the region, there's a huge public investment in all this infrastructure. We want to make sure that we're applying it in a very smart way to maximize the efficiency and the safety of our corridors. So today we have Ed Albritton from District 7, and he's going to step through some of this instrumentation. This probably is not the last time we're going to hear from him. So welcome, Ed.
Good afternoon.
Is it okay if I advance the slides or?
Yeah, I don't mind. Good afternoon, guys. As Margaret said, my name is Ed Albritton. I'm District 7 ITS Project Manager. I'm here to give an update on some of our connected vehicle initiatives, especially specifically connected and automated vehicle technologies supporting ICM. It says in Hillsborough County, it's really more of a district-wide initiative. Some of the things we're going to cover, I'm going to go over a brief definition of ICM for those that may not be well versed in what it means. It's one of our newer acronyms, and we're very proud of it. We're going to talk about some of the technologies being deployed as a part of CAV. I'm going to give you the project overview for our three big hitters in that realm: City of Tampa ATMS I-4 frame and 275 ICM. And then we're going to go, as Margaret mentioned, into the heart, I think, of the concern of the locals here, which is a data overview. What's going to be flying back and forth when we finally get this thing up and running. What is ICM? By definition, an operational approach that proactively manages multimodal and multi-jurisdictional transportation systems to optimize the flow of traffic and minimize congestion. It sounds pretty complicated. In more layman terms, it's zooming out on traffic management efforts that we've been doing probably for the last 20 years. You can't properly manage any one of our arterials by solely looking at its performance metrics. All of these corridors have a huge operational effect on neighboring corridors, be that limited access or arterial. And this is basically trying to use both existing systems and advanced technologies more holistically, if you will, regional traffic management center, rather than just having transit and coordination timings and preemption and freight. Having all those things, hopefully the latest and greatest of all those things, but all working towards regional traffic management. In other words, working outside of the silos that just their individual performance metrics kind of keep you. Some of the technologies we're going to do, I mean, these are probably pretty obvious for the audience here. RSUs, OBUs, roadside units, onboard units. The one I would like to highlight here are these IBP hubs. Our state roads, or our I-4 frame project, has a component for passive pedestrian detection. So we're going to be using LiDAR to detect the crosswalk and then illuminate advanced beacons when there's a pedestrian sensed. This device right here, which is essentially a small computer, is what's going to allow us to do all that processing for that out there at the edge. Into the project's overview. City of Tampa ATMS was the first one of our connected vehicle projects that got going. I shouldn't have to tell this audience much about that, considering that's where we're at. But 529 intersections, all of these that I'm going to discuss, it's a major fiber expansion where needed, wireless communication specifically as that pertains to the City of Tampa and the downtown area. They had some aesthetic things that they had to adhere to, plus the underground utility situation in downtown Tampa, if you don't know, is not very friendly to try to wade into. I think that might be where Hoffa is. Started construction in late January of 2020, and we're hoping that we get it onto the ground here in spring of 2024. $385.4, if you will, million budget, and we're 84% into that. On to I-4 frame, which is essentially, we were getting, and I used to have a presentation with actual hard numbers of how many either full directional closures or full interstate closures on I-4 between here and Orlando through that whole channel. And what it was doing to neighboring corridors, you know, for a because if there were a fatality or a risk incident that takes specialized vehicles to be mobilized and multiple hours of cleanup, or especially if it's hazmat related, another incident type thing that can shut it down for a long period of time if you have to get into any sort of asphalt restoration. Those are other issues. Frame was started specifically to try to put some stuff in place where we can try to, as soon as those incidents are known, hopefully eventually sensed automatically, and we can already start implement timings on primary and secondary path around that incident. And the first question people say when you talk about that scope is, doesn't Google Maps do that too? It does. It'll tell you where you probably should go. This system is going to try to make those signals and some secondary, tertiary devices work along that same goal. Not drastic change in timings, but if you get in front of an incident quick enough, you can keep it from becoming, the monstrosity that it does, whether that's through its own fallout or even worse case, secondary incidents and so forth and so on, compounds. A quick overview of the entirety of I-4 frame, which does entail 3 different districts, 4 if you count FTE, which has a sprinkling of scope in all 3 of the other districts. As you can see, every district has some portion of I-4 in it, and they all each their primary and secondary diversion routes and outfitted those with devices to try to help mitigate the incidents themselves. A little bit deeper dive on the D7 portion of it specifically just shows you what those routes are, and the legend goes into specifically what types of devices. We have several different types of RSUs. We have RSU and Bluetooth combo units, which I'll get into in just a little bit here about them. But the D7, the first contract D7 one was let in late February of 2022. It's also hoping to be completed around 2024, the summer of it. Started at a $9 million budget, 37 of that is complete. The second portion, D7 was kind of a standalone district by itself. If you look at the size of it, you can see we were almost the same cost as the other districts combined. Is 1.5 and another small component of Turnpike in July of 2022. They're going to finish about a year after our portion does, summer of 2025. 12% into that budget. Some construction photos, which probably aren't going to wow this crowd. The last one is ICM, our I-275 ICM, Integrated Corridor Management. This one touches components or portions of 6 different corridors, 574 or MLK, the different iterations of both Florida and Nebraska Avenue because they bracket I-275, portions of State Road 60, US 92, and a small portion of 616 or Spruce and Boy Scout. It started construction, what was let for construction in April of, May of 2022, and they're going to finish same time as Frame will, 2024, $29.2 million construction budget, 48%. Some more construction photos on the side. Some, I guess I failed to mention when I briefed you on Frame, the specific thing or the unique thing about it rather is that it used a system manager approach, wherein the EOR was also a portion of the integrator as well. Some of these devices went to them. They configure these devices for the intersections, for the locations, and then give them to the contractor for him to take out and put in the proper site. As you can see, they're about just under halfway done with that effort, 251 of a total of 544 RSUs between both contracts have been configured already, and over 600 plus ITS devices, including, what you see here, switches, cameras, relays, power management units, that sort. We're also anticipating another 800 plus of those devices to be configured as a part of the second contract. The city of Tampa, the one that's been going the longest, has already configured 1,100 plus devices. Moving into the data portion. Some of the things I want to cover. ATS-PM data, another mouthful of an acronym from ITS. Automated Traffic Signal Performance Metrics stands for. I'll get into that a little bit. We're going to get into the data being sent back and forth, transmitted and received, since that seems to be kind of where the questions are going to be coming from. A little bit about how you guys are going to be able to use that data for operations and planning purposes. We're going to briefly go over some of the connected vehicle apps. I'll be happy to go into detail on any ones that you'd like to. I'm going to talk about our decision support system that we're going to be trying to stand up here in the not too distant future, give you a little bit of a definition about what that guy is. ATSPMs, as I said, it's the biggest thing I want to talk about right now on this particular slide is just the frequency of the data and how dense that data is going to be over time. As you can see from this slide, we're anticipating 10 meg per signal per day. We're going to be pulling these signals 10 times a second, all day long, 24 hours a day. So, but I mean, as Kool Moe Dee said, for those of you who that is, knowledge is king, and in our world, knowledge is data. So we feel like there's going to be some benefits. Maybe downstream, maybe you may have to get some pretty large data sets to realize them. But we feel like there's some long-term benefits to that. Plus, we feel like the big immediate deliverable from ATSPMs is getting more mileage out of what you already have out there. This takes what would be a contact closure, what we call an actuation in the signal room, and puts it in context with your coordination itself. It's not just, hey, there are vehicles here. It's when did those vehicles arrive in relation to what we're trying to accomplish on this corridor, both at this intersection and as a whole, as a goal, So that's what that's about, some immediate realized benefits. That is data, but it's not going to be, I know that number looks, Margaret, I go back a little bit, once you saw 10 meg. I mean, data is relatively cheap nowadays if you're familiar with storage. So, I mean, I don't think that number should scare you. And, that could always be truncated. I'm not saying that every byte of that will be something that has to be preserved until the end of time, but like I said, we feel like there's value in doing that both short term and long term. Getting into some of the data communication streams, if you will, roadside units are going to be receiving basic safety messages from onboard units. They're going to be transmitting traveler information, or TIM messages to the onboard units. They're going to transmit signal phasing and timing information to OBUs. And then so from the OBU perspective, they're going to be transmitting VSM with position, speed, heading, and location initially. And I kind of want to stop right there for a second to say, because I know I've personally harped on how many data points a vehicle computer tracks. We're not there yet. You know what I'm saying? We're not, our system isn't even capable of receiving those. And just, I mean, even if you had an OEM onboard unit who could give us everything under the sun, our system is not ready for that. These data points right here are what we're going to be receiving from those onboard units initially, almost irrespective of type of onboard unit, emulated or app driven, or some sort of hybrid in between, or a manufacturer installed one off of the line itself. I also want to highlight, it's a little cartoon drawing of the intersection network, if you will, because this is the data that we feel like is going to be the biggest benefit straight away. And none of this is necessarily coming across anybody's system. None of this is going through anybody's network. This is putting a system in place that allows these different modes of transportation to communicate in real time with each other, with safety being, the main goal. Be that vehicle to vulnerable road user, we say pedestrian on here, but I understand that term is morphed into VRU. V to I or V to V. Those are going to be the immediate returns that, hopefully prevent, just the utilization of our system to become statistics that we have to chase down later on, whether that's, the cost of what these crashes do, what it does to our overall network, things of that sort. So I think we might have oversold what we're trying to do a little bit as far as the data that is capable, or that we see being capable long term. But for short term, sort of RTMC, TMC, local DOT, irrespective of any of that, agnostic of all of that, this is going to be the huge real time, immediately, once we get it working properly, we're going to get it. And, I don't know if we're going to be able to trend that out in some of the stats that we track. Are we going to see a noticeable decline in, VRU collisions? Well, I certainly hope so. I mean, that's what we're shooting for. I mean, that's, and we have some other stuff that we'll get into when we go over the apps. High level architecture, and I'll follow.
Just real quick. Sorry. If you go back, I mean, ultimately, the goal is, safety, but the safety comes about through how people are using the network. So just looking at what we have up here, the data that's going to be coming in, and it's going to the onboard units, which is in the hands of the drivers, but also with the side computing, and then being able to commute in real time or communicate in real time with pedestrians and the pedestrians to the drivers. I mean, ultimately, we want to create a very safe system, but the safe system comes from having a well orchestrated system. So we're going to try to smooth out the traffic. So when we look at, like you have braking, or those are future, but that's available now. But just the position, speed, heading, location, all that information is going to be used to help smooth out the traffic. Because the highest efficiency is where people are moving very close in speed together, and then they're going to be able to go through and just when the traffic is moving smoother, it tends to be more efficient. And then when the speed goes down is actually where we get the maximum utilization and saturation flow rates. And then ultimately, hopefully that ends up being more safe for driver to driver, but then also with pedestrians. So anyway,
Right.
I just wanted to create a pause for you in all this, and because ultimately that's the goal, is to get the maximum capacity out of the transportation system.
For
And
sure.
what, I don't want people to be fooled outside of the room. I mean, we all know this, but we can't create more capacity. So all those people that are driving by themselves, guess what? We're not going to fix that through this system.
No, and this system tries to touch every one of those bases for the baseball, for the Braves fans in the house. Every one of those bases, every mode. So that's why TSP is a part of it. That's why
Right.
freight is a part of it. You can't ignore it. You can't ignore an emergency vehicle. It's coming through your system, whether you want it, hope you want it to come through your system. But it's happening. So it's like a zipper merge. I don't understand why people fight that. They're coming over and they have nowhere else to go. You know what I mean? Let's all just get along here and leave it at the app, and it's better for everybody. I don't want to make it seem like this information will never be at anyone's disposal. It's just right now, I don't think it's the department's intent to send any data about these interactions, about these communications back and forth between the different modes of transportation to the data exchange platform for any kind of historical indexing or studying purposes or anything like that. Not initially. That can all be worked out downstream, and it's certainly being built with that kind of flexibility in mind.
Mhm.
Can I add something too, since we're here?
Yes.
Yeah,
So-
for sure. I want this to be kind of
Sure.
more freeform because I don't really know where the concerns are, and I want to make sure that we cover them and put some salve on all of them.
So I'm actually on the team for the evaluation of the iPhone frame through ESN. So one of the questions that we have is, does DOT have any estimation on when we expect to have a certain penetration rate for CVs so that these things actually work? Because unless you have the OBUs out there, these things, they're just sending the messages and that's it.
I would be very reluctant to try to throw a dart at a time. I would say that that's probably a multifaceted hurdle. It's not just about having that device in a vehicle. It's about having the driver of that vehicle be engaged enough with that device to get it to be a part of our security credential management system. There are certain steps that have to be taken, and I don't know how laborious or involved they are for the person. I hope and pray that they're seamless as possible, because if it requires some legwork, I fear we're not going to get that quote unquote penetration rate.
Right. Either that or we're going to have to wait for the OEMs to put them in the cars.
Well, the FTC, their recent ruling on the joint waiver request, and we're already approved now as well. We're hoping that gets some of this train moving a little bit faster than it has been. And that's been one of their concerns from a manufacturing standpoint. I probably don't have to tell you that. was just that, where was the FCC going to go with that?
Yeah.
You know, and now that they've given us a little bit of a window to work with, we're hoping that they start rolling more of those out. And there were a lot of auto manufacturers that were part of that waiver request as well. So it sounds, or at least it appears that they're coming to the table.
I have a question. The estimate of the 10 megabytes per signal per day, is that with all the data we're actually receiving at the infrastructure level, or is that just that's all of the data?
It's wherever that Utah server or whatever form of ATSPM, I guess you're using it. I'm going to beg ignorance on that. I waited out of the arterial world about 6 years ago, so I hear some things about some of that. I knew what it was when I left, but I've never had any hands-on experience with ATSPMs. I know that each one of these projects is trying to make sure we outfit these intersections with controllers that are capable of that if they're not already.
So the reason I'm asking that is, although, and this is for Hillsborough County, some of the signals do have fiber. Upstream, they are interconnected with copper, for example. And so some of our links have a max speed of less than 1 megabit per second. So at that rate, 3 of these systems will max out our net in those areas. So perhaps we can discuss about how the project can help us improve those copper links that we have.
Well, if they're on state systems, I would hope that if they're carrying any amount of volume, vehicle volume to speak of, I would hope that we already have plans to put fiber optic cable in place. And I would say that there's probably some sort of review that would be done before, it's not just the controller, obviously, that needs to be replaced in order to make it possible. If your network can't support that kind of bandwidth need, then yeah, we're probably not going to try to put it on there if we just know it's going to pay you.
Okay.
Unless we just want to watch it smoke. Some of the stuff that we feel like you guys can use for operations and planning, and some of this, like I've mentioned to many people, we feel like signal phase and timing, well, store up lost time. Letting somebody know when it goes green, hopefully they'll put the phone down, re-engage themselves on driving the vehicle. And because that's so frustrating for me as somebody who worked in signal timings for 15 years, nothing drives me crazier than to know for a fact that I'm not even going to move before this thing goes red again. And that's the only reason. If we all started at the same time, we'd all get through. But there's 29 transactions that have to happen before I even get to. And like I said earlier, the ATSPM data we feel like is going to give you more granular information about the existing cord that you have. So maybe we can get more like that with timing cycles and stretch that period out a little bit. So rather than, if you know that your issue may be concentrated on one portion or an end of your corridor, then maybe you just massage that a little bit. Don't do a full-blown retiming. I mean, because if you haven't done any major capacity improvements or haven't had any major trip generation come into it, we all know what the answer is going to be. It's going to be a higher cycle length. You're going to let it follow the same percentage distribution it was at before. And that's necessary. I'm not poo-pooing that effort. At some point, you do have to recalibrate. You've had a huge increase in volumes. Another thing like we feel like you'll be able to realize with that, and that's something that will also be an immediate thing. As soon as we get that stood up, you start getting that high density information, we feel like you'll be able to start maximizing some of your existing timings. The CV data, and this is the one where I think we probably have the most misgivings or misunderstandings rather, is both in, and I briefly touched on how much information is going to be actually coming from these OBUs initially. And the second one is right now the department is not going to be sending any data to any TMC, as a part of what we're doing. Our expectation is that the data exchange platform is where you would go to access it's partially your data as well, to access that for your utilization, for your studies. And I won't be able to tell you with any great detail exactly how these things are going to be able to leverage in the future. As I said, I do believe, I don't know enough about data sciences, but I do believe that if you get big enough data sets, especially ones that you can cross-reference through certain points, I do believe some things will come into, into view for us that we can't see in the limited data set that we're. And maybe that's worth exploring if you want to get some data scientists in here to talk about how that. I also think that if AI makes a big difference in our realm, it's going to be in number crunching like that. We have enormous amounts of data that we needed to run 10 years of. We can do it overnight or whatever. So we're not going to be flipping any switch and, all the lights start going red in your facilities, or, you're not going to need, 2 or 3 extra staff members once we get these things properly stood up. Now, you may need to alter the skill sets or change or give some training early on for your folks. And once again, I don't know much about servers, but I know enough to be dangerous. But, you may need to get them a little more plugged into the ones and zeros side of it, the data side of it, just because that's, we're going to need people to maintain all these devices we're putting out there. And you're not going to be able to maintain these roadside units with a tool pouch. You're going to need a laptop, you're going to need OBUs, you're going to need, and that's another thing. We are providing the locals, especially the ones that are part of this. We're purchasing a certain amount of OBUs. The department is as a part of this initiative. We got funding for it. We're trying to be a little cautious about that. District 5 is a little bit ahead of where we are in this entire push, and I think they did a huge purchase straight out of the gate, a lot of outreach with emergency services and different kind of fleets to outfit with these onboard units, and that just turned out to be problematic. So I think we're starting paperwork on our first 10, which will at the very least help us get these projects, tested and accepted. We have money and time to buy more, and we will. It's just started that process. So we're not going to also just throw something at you that you can't even tell us whether or not it's working properly. And like I said, the data exchange platform, just to touch on it a little bit longer, that's going to be your access point for all this information. OEMs will have real-time access to this for their purposes. This is everybody's sandbox once the data gets up there. That's the central housing for it. So that's where you got to go. That's where the spigots are going to be. And like I said, I can't imagine that we'll ever stand in anyone's way on getting access to that, provided you go through, I'm sure, what procedure we establish. Real quickly on some of the connected vehicle applications, a lot of these should be pretty self-explanatory by the title. Traffic incident management, that's, incident management about, what's going on. Detection, maintenance, construction management, emergency management centers. Dynamic is backup queues, roadway hazards, weather information, kind of important here in our area. Speed warning and enforcement, that one seems pretty self-explanatory. I always pause on wrong way vehicle detection and warning. I spend a fair amount of my workday and my work life involved in outfitting interstate ramps with wrong way detection. The Howard Franklin Bridge is going to have some mainline detection, wrong way detection points as well. But we're basically almost at the end of the road for those kind of countermeasures. We've done all the stuff we can do with the bullnoses and the painted shields, and now we're outfitting dynamic detection on the ingress egress points. But this is the next logical step to solving those. We need to know, A, what's the right way, B, okay, he's not doing it. Let's tell people upstream, prepare for somebody that's driving the wrong way. We've got nowhere else to go, and we're almost in front of the technology itself, if you want to be honest. We've kind of struggled bringing these vendors, to the line of what we needed, just because we put the need out there before the technology was ready for it. Road weather, motorist alerts, another one that seems kind of self-explanatory. We already have RWIS systems deployed throughout the district as a part of our limited access network. Q warning, another one that I do like to highlight on, because I do work predominantly on the freeways. This is one of our more severe incidents that we can have, is a vehicle moving at freeway speeds coming up on a standing queue of vehicles. Those are very, very violent collisions, usually not survivable by at least a portion of the crash. Reduced speed zone warning, lane closure. This is just more, whether that's related to work zones, school zones, pedestrian crossing areas. Obviously, anything that's going to increase the safety for vulnerable road users, we're going to try to maximize that. Work zone management, another one of our kind of problem areas as a state and as a district is work zone crashes. We've made a concerted effort with trying to deploy smart work zones and those kind of initiatives to try to get in front of that trend. Especially given the fact that we've got so much construction going on the interstate system right now. The most that obviously is there's been in my brief time here. And incident scene safety monitoring, that's just, letting them know if we got an incident ahead that we're trying to mitigate, please don't go become a part of it. And you'll see on each of these that we've got a little red thing at the bottom. He brought it up earlier. OBU penetration is obviously going to be critical for this. We don't get that, then obviously the amount of data that we get, or even the amount of these safety type messages being sent will obviously be reduced. We can't send somebody a message if they can't receive it. Arterial connected vehicle stuff, these are also, some of this stuff already exists in some form or fashion. We're hoping that this is just a better version of it. Transit signal priority, emergency vehicle preemption. Advanced railroad crossing is kind of a neat one, I think, for those that are unfamiliar in areas. And we have people, a lot of those people in our area driving through for the first time, made the wrong turn. Matter of fact, on my way here, I saw somebody try to go the wrong way on bi-directional with all those signs. So you never know. And freight, I do also want to highlight that State Road 60 portion that got added on for the I-4 frame also has a huge freight component to it. We're big in trying to integrate freight in the district. I mean, I don't know how many times any of you go down I-4 when you're in Orlando, but it's almost nothing but distribution centers from here to there at this point. So we've got more trucks on the road than we ever have. And we want to make sure that we're integrating them as good as we can. Decision support system. This is ICM, the I-275 ICM project has as part of its scope to deliver a functional decision support system. Not to get into the legalese of it, we're hoping to be the Oz of all that we're doing. We're hoping it takes all these individual maximized and beefed up subsystems and makes them work harmoniously without human intervention. And we understand that we're going to be leveraging these systems with a human intervention for a while until we get to that point. But this is the long-term goal. District 5 has started this process well ahead of us. They've ran into some issues with their detection platforms and have had to take a couple steps back and rethink some of those. We're at the point right now where I say we basically on me. Sorry, she's listening. We need to decide, are we following the wake of D5 with the system that they're using? Squeary is supposed to be getting tasked with writing another one, or blaze our own trail. So, yeah, I don't want to spend a ton of time on that.
I just want to add, going back to that, one of the reasons the ICM corridors got funded, they moved up on the priority list because of all the construction on 275, downtown interchange, and West Shore, the reconstruction of West Shore interchange. So the reason why those 6 got all that instrumentation, and they wanted, like you have up there, that there's plans that use the data to help make the decisions on which plan to grab. Because when we're under construction, most of the stuff that we've been coordinating with DOT on is at night. But still, while you just have construction on any transportation infrastructure or any facility, and you just put a barrel up there, and boom, you've already lost capacity right there. So the ICM was moved up on the list because of that, knowing that there's going to be a lot of construction on the interstate. So-
Not only that, but there's a portion of it. Now, we weren't able to get any actual financial incentive in the contract, so there's no real dangling carrot. But we've asked the contractor to try to deliver the portions of that which would be beneficial in mitigating construction before the entire project as a whole. Now, I've gone through some integration, and I know what kind of an ask that is. I've never really seen two integrations as a part of the same project. So we'll see how that goes, but that's our intent, is to try to get some of that stood up even before final acceptance and try to start leveraging it.
Yeah.
While that 275, because that's still going to be going on for quite some time. DTI won't even be into their real construction for almost another year now. They've got enough micro tunneling and stuff like that.
Do you want to argue about that? They're already closed.
Oh, they've
On
already
local
done,
streets, they're already impacted. the
they've
local
already
streets,
relocated
so-
our trunk. Well aware of what.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So-
Driving MOC out of it.
Yeah, so, yeah, they may not be doing on the lanes, but, well, they do have. Anyway,
Right, so I guess we kind of already had a little bit of a discussion before this tonight, but I mean, just in kind of to wrap it up and to get on with the agenda, I wanted to come here and make sure that you guys understood that we're not going to be inundating you with a bunch of data that you don't have any use for or even can't do anything with. That's not really the intent of these systems. Like I said before, if you have something out of these systems that you feel like might be a good data point, I've been told, and trying to prepare for this, I talked to Squeary briefly before I came in. I've been told that, right now it's a little bit of a, I don't want to say a blank slate, but right now I think there's some flexibility to, if we're not already intending on tracking it, to, since the system is set up to do so, to go ahead and start doing that. And you're going to want access to some of this information straight away. Some of these, the minute they really start getting stood up properly, just the frequency of it itself, may be a benefit from it. Once we get real good hardware information, just the frequency of that is going to tell you, something about traffic operations in that segment. So yeah, you're not going to need to hire any like data engineers or anything of the sort straight away. At least not yet.
Well, first, I just want to thank you for being here. I mean, because this was the kind of deeper dive that I was interested in hearing, so we could help prepare and start looking towards the future. I mean, it's nothing worse that, you're data rich, information poor. So we want to start preparing how we could be a smarter city. How can we use the data to bring out more efficiency? And just this week, there was conversation about Gandy. And so that's already a 3 jurisdictional interaction if we went forward, if you consider VIA. They're above us now. But I mean, it was a collaboration between DOT, the county, and the city, and we're all involved. So are there opportunities for us to share data and then use it for the analytics to maximize the efficiency of the road system?
For sure, for all users is what I
Right.
would highlight. Right? I mean, we need transit working to its best to
Right.
draw as many people that are willing to do that, to do so. Micro mobility is your solution. We want you to be able to do that as seamlessly as possible,
Exactly.
and of course, for passenger vehicles and those components, freight, those sorts of things as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned transit, so there is, I don't know if anyone knows this, but there is a proof of concept that's underway under the ATMS. So we have TSP on Nebraska, they're working on that right now. So we're working with the Econolite on a proof of concept, and Hart has some of their buses upfitted and so on. And so we're working on that right now. So I'm not sure when to make it active, but that is in the works.
We're doing something similar as a part of the IC.
Oh, okay. Excellent. So thank you for being here and thank you for the deeper dive versus the high level stuff. So, and I hope your slides will be available, right?
They absolutely,
Okay,
yeah, I mean,
perfect.
I just received it this morning, so I just uploaded it to the calendar invite, and I can even forward it to you as an email. Works, I don't know, it's a longer, it's a larger file.
it's large. I have a smaller PDF if somebody doesn't want the bells and whistles.
If you
That's
can
usually
send it
what
to
I
me-
do is a PDF.
If you send it to me, I'll send it off.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah, I think we got that slide. Yeah.
Well, and, you know, I'm on the meeting. So you have my contact information. If you guys have any questions about any of this, actually, it doesn't have to be about anything traffic office. I can be your source for that and get it where it needs to go.
Well, thank you again. Were there any more questions or comments? Yes.
My name is Dr. Alan Schechter. I am a data scientist, but I'm have no familiarity in this particular space. So and forgive my naivety with my question here is, what is the form structure of all of this data?
As far as like what file format?
Well, is it structured data or is it coming in as unstructured data? And
No,
is
it's structured.
it's all structured, it's all numerical? Or is it text
It is.
component to it?
I couldn't tell you what format it was in.
It's in some kind of tabular form though.
I don't know if it's tabular.
If somebody is looking at the data that comes in, what are they looking at?
I couldn't tell you that because it's just going to be on the server in Tallahassee, so.
But the output of whatever is coming out of that server in Tallahassee is in what format?
Well, we have a special file format for our overall central operating system, called a JSON file. So, I mean, that dictates how the messages are built and how they have to be structured, the right header, the right footer, and that kind of information. But I mean, I think what you're driving at is, you know, is it, you know, sort of indexable or searchable, or will it be? To answer your question, yeah.
No. So each one of these data points is coming in what? How are they formatted?
That's what consultants.
I am not a data scientist, but I will, so they're going to be georeferenced, utilizing that. Okay, so my guess, and this is a guess, is that it is going to be more tabular on the side. It's going to come in georeference with specific information, or specific data, I should say. We're not to the information point yet. Where you're going to have what's going to be called, for instance, SPAT data. That would be your signal controllers. It will have other data sets related to a lot of the connected vehicles. That data, which I believe will be a structured data set, some kind of a tabular format. I doubt we're talking a lot of text here, because we're not coming in, this is not a social media poll, this is not a contextual poll, this is specifically a data poll coming from the road set. Is then going to go ahead and migrate to the Regional Traffic Management Center in the region, in this case in Tampa. It will then be shot to the cloud and go to the data lake. In the data lake, that is organization, and that's what Edward's referring to. That data will be organized. Now, at this point, I would immediately defer to the fine young gentleman putting together, and ladies putting together the data lake in Tallahassee. But at that point, we will be able to access the data back the other way after some level, I'm sure, of some kind of filtering and cleaning at that point. And then we will have access to that data, and that's what Ed was referring to earlier in his presentation. And I apologize if that's a little high level, probably for what you're looking for, but that is what we're looking at in general. Georeference data with some level of the laneage, as well as the component locations tied to specific data sets for the various CV applications that Ed referred to. That's somewhat.
There's also a lot of information at the DOT website with references on the format of these messages and the data you can obtain from these systems. So you may want to look at the DOT reference.
Do you have a specific?
No, I mean, if I give you a website right now, you search for
Go to-
DOT connected vehicle.
Yeah, you can also go to cflsmartminutes.com. I would be willing to bet that there's probably some information there. And then also the Department of Transportation Central Office site as well. But please understand that a lot of, when we talk about whether it's numeric or not, I think that's fairly safe. When we talk about that it's tabular, that's reasonably safe. That being said, the data lake is still being formed, for lack of a better way to say it. They're in, I believe, phase 1 or phase 2 of a 5-phase development process. So there's going to be a maturing that's going to occur over the next couple of years.
Okay, so you'll have like a column for speed and if a crash occurred at a certain point in time in a certain location and whatever else you're collecting.
Yes, it will be some, and I don't want to be too, whether it's a column, whether it's a row, I don't want
Well,
to,
it's columns and.
but you get the idea.
Yeah.
If everything's geo-referenced, then it's going to have to be cross-referenced across the table, right?
Right.
That gives you your geolocate tied with whatever particular data, to your point, that we're referring to. And keep in mind, it's not just the geo-reference of the connected vehicle device, it's the geo-reference of the laneage. How wide is the lane, where the lane is located, that matters for the situational awareness with regards to connected vehicles on things like queue warning and things of that nature.
So then after you have these tabular forms, if you will, how and what method are you using to analyze what is occurring over time, whatever period of time you're talking about?
Can you define analysis? Are you referring to the informational analysis or are you referring to the data storage?
No, the analysis of the data that gets stored in this tabular form 1 that's collected.
So what I'll do is I'll speak to what we've been doing up to this point with rather large data sets that we currently have available. What we're basically doing is we're pulling that data
I'm
in.
sorry, can we carry this conversation on after the meeting?
Oh.
We have regular business we need to get back
Yes, ma'am,
to. I'm sorry,
No
yeah,
problem.
those are details that most of us aren't going to be able to address. Very smart question. Okay, so with that, again, thank you, Ed. Glad to have you
Pleasure.
here. Welcome back. Any updates you ever have, just call me. Yeah, I'm going to go back to the beginning of the agenda. So Gail, So Gail, could, now we do have a forum, if you could call roll, please.
Yes, ma'am. Margaret Kubalins,
Here,
Brian Zayas,
Your person.
Brian McCarthy,
here,
Dexter Corbin,
Here.
Jeff Sims,
Here.
Achilles Cortellus,
Here.
Fred Baxter, Frank Kaufenauer, Pauline Castillo, Anna Quinones. And then we have Ed Alberton from FDOT. We do have an in-person quorum.
just to clear the record, Dexter is not here in person, he's online.
Correct.
Yes, I have him recorded as being virtual.
Okay, good, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so we need to go back, we're on item number 4, review and approval of the minutes. So the minutes were provided in the packet that was circulated. Do we have any comments? Any corrections? No? None being heard? Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve. the
Achilles
minutes.
makes a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Do we have a second?
Second motion.
Brian
Brian
Zayas.
Zayas.
So we have a motion and a second. With that, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None being heard, the motion passes. Thank you very much. Okay, then we'll move to the action items. So the first one is the 2050 Plan Needs Assessment for Congestion Management and Crash Mitigation. Ms. Shaka is going to be the staff member to present. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, ITS committee members. I'm Vishaka Shivraman, and I'll be your staff presenting the results of the 2050 needs assessment for the congestion management and crash mitigation. So let's begin. So this slide is called the plan ingredients, and this will, as part of the 2050 plan, it helps to match the forecasted revenues to the desired level of performance for several key indicators of the transportation system based on the expected cost to achieve that level. This presentation will mainly focus on the congestion management and crash mitigation for safety and traffic treatments. This page shows some of the indicators that are also studied as part of the 2050 plan, namely real choices when not driving, major investments for economic growth, goods movement and truck routes, and equity. Once the public has decided what level of performance it desires for each indicator, we will estimate how much would that cost and match the revenues to that condition. This next section is the methodology that explains how we forecasted crashes and condition performance and how we estimated the cost to improve the performance. To estimate the number of crashes and congestion in 2050, we work with a consultant that used a proprietary sketch tool to generate these forecasts. This tool takes the model outputs from the 2050 travel demand model, including the forecasted volumes, the travel reliability, and use some algorithms to calculate the travel time reliability, minutes of delay, and the crashes by severity and time. These numbers represent the expected crash and congestion performance if nothing was done by 2050 to either problem. To see how much improvement could be achieved by 2050 with investments, we also work with local governments to select treatments that could be applied to some of the most problematic corridors and generated cost estimates. The benefits of each treatment was based on the FHWA TOPS BC and the research done from the Crash Modification Factor Clearinghouse. Beginning with the congestion management scenarios, we assumed a baseline annual spending of $24 million, which is called the trend funding. This assumption is that the funding reflects the current spending by the jurisdictions across the region on operational improvements. These treatments are considered for the most congested corridors. On freeways, we consider ramp metering and part-time hard shoulder running as two of the treatments. And on arterials and collectors, we use real-time traffic adaptive signal control technology. For the performance level spending, which is the increased higher bracket level spending, we assume that expanded funding is needed to improve the system. In addition to the previous treatments, we also considered traffic incident management on the freeways, and on the arterials and collectors, we considered left turn lanes wherever applicable. This slide will give you a synopsis of how the congestion management treatments impact the system. And we broke down the roadways by collector, divided arterials, undivided, and interstate freeway. As you can see that, as pointed out in the chart, you can see that the greatest improvement is seen in the local collectors and the freeway, especially for the performance level spending, which is the expanded level spending. If the current spending level holds through 2050, we can deploy these treatments to improve about 300 miles of roadway in total, and that will help to reduce the peak period delay reduction by 48%, and also to achieve speed of the increase of 14% closer to the posted speed limits. On the other hand, for the performance level spending, we considered double the investment. So doubling the investment would help to improve about 550 miles of roadway across the county and to achieve about 70% of peak period delay reduction and to help to increase the speed by 21%. The annual cost is also shown in the slide. Moving on to crash mitigation. Similarly, as the congestion management, we assumed a baseline spending of 24 million per year. And for the increased expanded funding, we assume $50 million. These treatments are considered, we're also developed in consultation with the local partners based on the most common treatment deployed currently across this county and the region, namely physically separated bike lanes and pedestrian crosswalk signals, lighting at the intersections, some access management treatments, including driveway reduction and converting two-way left turn lanes to raised median. We also looked at some of the traffic calming reduction treatments, including speed control and traffic speed enforcement. Unfortunately, only the baseline budget only helps to treat a few of the roads in the county. So to achieve greater benefits, it's when we looked at the double budget, which helps treatments for more roads in the region. So again, this table is similar to the congestion management table that you saw. And here we have again broken them by divided arterial, collector, and undivided arterial. The treatments were applied only for mainly these type of roadways, and because the level of treatments were mainly for safety, they were not considered on freeways. So at the baseline spending of 25 million per year, we can expect almost 650 miles of center line miles improved, resulting in an overall crash reduction of 35%. For the ped bike, you can see that there is a bigger reduction, almost 55%. Similarly, with double the budget, we can apply treatments to over 1,060 miles, center line miles of roadways, resulting in 43% of crash reduction total, a fatal crash reduction of 46%, and a pedestrian bike reduction and ped bike crash reduction of 70%. There is a number there which shows that for the collector, for the trend level of spending, we were not able to improve any miles of roadway. The reason being that the money gets expended before we reach the kind of road. The money is first spent on the divided arterial, followed by undivided, and then the collectors. So if you notice that for the performance scenario, we are actually able to vastly improve the performance and treat over 277 miles of roadway and achieve a very great performance reduction for crashes and for total crashes, ped bike, and fatal crashes. While we acknowledge that the needs are greater than what we have presented today, we are awaiting guidance from the TPO board and the public. We'll be presenting them at a board workshop in October to inform expected crash and congestion performance levels. This will help to determine what level of treatments we can achieve, which level of performance we can achieve. While we wait for the guidance, in the report there is a cost performance curve, which will help you to clearly understand how much money is required to reduce crashes and congestion to a certain level. Because note that it is a curve, so even if you increase the money beyond a certain limit, then the expected performance results is very less. So the takeaway today is that $24 million per year could reduce future peak delay by almost 50%, and to achieve a speed increase of 14% on 300 miles of the roadway. Double the budget will help you to achieve greater results on more than 550 miles of roadway. Similarly, for safety, 25 million per year would help to reduce the fatal crashes by 35%. And ped bike crashes by 55% on 640 miles of roadway. And for double the budget, you can achieve greater crash reduction to up to 70% of ped bike for over 1,060 miles of roadway in the future. With that, I request the committee to approve the draft 2050 needs plan for congestion management and crash mitigation, and please forward it to the TPO board for consideration. Take any questions now.
Thank you, Prichaka. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, John.
I kind of have a question, just trying to understand it. So it's broken down into congestion, it's like it's two separate items.
They are very similar. in the analysis because the analysis takes the travel demand model output and uses similar algorithms for both these set of treatments. So the methodology is the same, which is why we combine these two into.
Right.
these.
Okay. But like when you talk about, are they looked at independently? So like when you say it's roughly 24 million
Yes.
and then the other one's 25 million, that would mean if you went to implement both of them, you'd have to be implementing 40 million.
Yeah. So because it is two different sets of data, the data output is the same, but the analysis is done considering them separately because kind of treatments are safety treatment separate and small treatment separate.
Okay.
So yes, the combined cost would be 25 million plus 24 million based on the table that I showed you previously.
Did they do anything like, let's say for the 24 million that would help with congestion? Was there any like doubling up or that might help with some safety aspects? That maybe.
It should have some applied safety benefits, but like I said, it's just a true mathematical algorithm.
Right.
So it will just look at the benefits of applying these treatments. Because I believe the methodology is that it will show you, predict the number of crashes. That you input the current crash number and then you run the steps. So it will give you a predicted crash number in the future. Actually, the detailed report has individual roadway, so and also the cost of treatments on individual. There is more to it, so you can see how much benefit is on each corridor in separate tables. Yeah, I would assume that there might be some effects of safety improvements due to the condition treatments and vice versa, but it is for the purposes of the report, it's just considered separately.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
And Shana, you said that the countermeasures are different for safety and
Yes.
for completely, okay.
Yes. So these are purely for safety, but some of them might also have some condition relief, and likewise, it's just a little slow. So see, these are mainly the GISMO treatments, but I would think that adaptive signal control will also help with crash reduction. I cannot have those numbers because these numbers for the benefit cost comes from the TOPS BC FHWA guidance and also from the studies done from the research of the crash clearinghouse, CMF clearinghouse. So I think those give exclusively the benefit for safety, for condition.
Sorry, just one last thing. For pet bike crashes, was one of the countermeasures more bike lanes, is that right?
Bike lanes considered here, sorry. Yeah, the bike lanes considered here were separated bike lanes.
Probably buffered by.
But I think as far as I understand, the report gives you similar research using those treatments across the country, right? So that's how you get the number for what is the improvement performance level.
More comments?
Yeah, I have another question. If you could go back to one of the tables.
Are you looking at the condition management?
The one where you had the trend and performance where you were breaking down.
Second, it's just a little slow. Not this one, right?
Oh, no, this was fine. So I guess looking at the like red circles, for instance, you see an improvement over what was trending. So are you suggesting then that we not spend as much money on the divided arterials or the ones that aren't showing any type of major impact?
No. This totally means that with the trend spending, which means that we are still using the same amount of money as we are using currently. So we built the base number from what we are spending across the different jurisdictions based on their CIPs and their current spending. So historic data for the last 5 years, if you continue using that money for the next 25 years, how you would achieve 59% crash reduction. But if you were able to, but that's because you see, when you see the divided arterial has the same level in both trend and performance, it's because you're using the money all on the trend, on the divided arterials, then moving on to the next function class of roadway. And the reason for that is because the highest crash corridors are some of the highest crash corridors are those. So you apply the treatments on the highest crash corridors, From when that money gets over, then you move to the next set of functional class votes and then downward. So collector gets the next level of treatment. And that's why you see that the benefits remain the same, but if you look at the trend spending for the undivided arterial and collector, you have a very high result in the performance spending level. These are just assuming that we are able to spend more money on the roads. The treatments are the same for crashes. It's a little different. For crashes, the treatments are the same, but we are able to cover more number of roadways. But for congestion, we are applying more types of treatments for the same roadways.
Thank you.
I can explain to you more if you want to send me an email or give me a call.
Okay. Can you go back to your final slide, please?
Yes.
Yep, thank you.
Sure.
So do we have a motion to approve the draft 2050 plan needs assessment?
Brian McCarthy makes a motion to approve, to recommend to the council for boards for consideration.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second?
I second it.
Achilles seconds. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? None being heard. The motion passes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So this is going actually to the board in November, because in October, we are actually presenting all the needs assessments to consider it for the revenue forecast. That's what I presented in one of the slides. So we will see at the board workshop, we are trying to do a presentation on what is it? Revenue forecast to see that what kind of revenues we can target and what will be available, so we get an estimate of how much we need, what kind of performance we need to achieve. And then this will be presented as an individual item in the following month.
Okay.
There's different conditions, there's different needs assessment documents. Most of the staff are working on individual needs assessment, and this will be presented separately at different months. They're all going now and in the next 2 3 months.
Okay, and what was the date when it's going to be?
The board meeting is next Wednesday. I believe it's October 8th. October 11th. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. We'll move on to the 2024 draft meeting calendar.
So staff has put together a 2024 calendar. This is still a draft form, which includes all the meetings. And I would request this committee to approve this calendar.
You know,
Are you able to see the dates? I'm sorry, the number,
So January 4th.
Is this better or is it still smaller?
This is fine.
Okay, I will bring up that and point to the ITS. The ITS meetings are January 4th, April 4th, July 4th, and October 3rd.
I think it's pretty obvious July 4th would be a problem. So,
Yes.
so,
Like I said, this was, I think, auto-generated based on the first day of the first Thursday of the month.
Right.
That's a good catch, thank you. So for July, do you want to maybe postpone it to the following week?
Okay.
I'll make a
so-
note of that, if that's okay, if we push it to the second week of July.
Is
I was-
January 4th okay, or do we want to do it the second week of January, or does that conflict with the board meeting? I guess we have it up here.
The board meeting for January would be 10th, so this would be like following Thursday. This might have to be the 11th. But if there's any action item that needs attention, no, we won't have another meeting until January. So if there is any item for the ITS committee that needs to be approved, it might have to be presented as a status report if it is after the board meeting. That's how I believe it works.
Okay, well, we can leave it the 4th of January, that's fine. Okay, then April 4th, does anyone have a calendar? Do we want to go ahead and make a recommendation for what we should do in July?
I mean, I would recommend going a week later unless it's going to cause a conflict with the board meeting. I mean, that's the only thing.
Never.
No, board
You're
of
on
recess,
recess.
board of
It
recess
doesn't
doesn't
matter.
matter. So we have the.
Yeah, let's go ahead and
Everybody.
January, just the second week instead.
Yes,
For July.
Yeah, I'm sorry, July.
okay. But the January remains the same? You would still.
Yeah, January 4th remains.
Okay, and July 4th, which needs to be pushed to another month.
To the following week.
Following week.
Sorry,
Just the following week.
To clarify, that would be July 11th.
Thank you. Okay, so we have January 4th. Is it April 4th?
Yep.
July 11th, and then October 3rd.
Or-
Okay. All right, so why don't we make a motion to set the calendar for 2024 for January 4th, April 4th, July 11th, and October 3rd. I'll make the motion to approve the calendar as presented with these changes. I can, as the president or the chair.
This is Jeff Sims. I'll make a motion to approve the calendar with the one addendum for July 4th being moved to July.
Okay, you have a second?
Brian Sayers, the second motion.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Please say aye. Any opposed? None being heard, the motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us up to being on time and back on schedule. So thank you. We're going to hear a status report from Connor. Are you presenting?
I'm actually not, but
Oh, okay.
I'm Connor McDonald, TPO staff, and I'll introduce the consultant presenting virtually. So Dr. Sergio is an infrastructure management specialist using his expertise in statistical analysis and modeling asset performance and traffic data to support transportation asset management and system performance improvement. He has extensive experience developing databases and analyzing infrastructure asset data to develop performance models, interactive tools, and visualizations to conduct the scenario analyses for the performance target setting process and investment strategies development. And this is a needs assessment coming out of the long range transportation plan. So those introductory slides that we saw before with Prashant's presentation would apply to this as well. And with that, I'll give it over to Pedro or Dr. Sturridge.
All right, thanks, Connor. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so I am Pedro Serios from Cambridge Systematics. I am the project manager from the consulting team. We also have Alex Rubin and Yinfei Huang in the meeting here from Cambridge Systematics that were leading most of the analysis I will be presenting today. So in today's presentation, I will discuss the status on preliminary results from the development of the 2050 LRTP needs assessment for state of good repair and resilience for Hillsborough TPO. So the slide here shows the items from the agenda items from our presentation today. I'll start discussing the scope of work, including objectives and work plan. Then I will discuss the preliminary analysis. More specifically, I will talk about the data and assumptions that we use for this analysis, and then the results for payment asset needs, bridge asset needs, and resilience improvement needs. The next part, I'll discuss the conclusions from this preliminary analysis, the next steps, and then I will open for questions. Next slide, please. Perfect. Okay, so the objectives of this project is mainly to perform a state of good repair and resiliency analysis as part of the 2050 LRTP update. So this analysis is a key component of the LRTP update. And this work involves first an analysis of the current and future needs to achieve a state of good repair of payment, bridges, and transit assets for the region. So this is the typical content that's included in this type of analysis for an LRTP update. The right side of the screen is showing the cover page of the 2045 LRTP Good Repair Needs Assessment. Now, what's new in this analysis for this 2050 LRTP update is that we are now also including an analysis of the resilience investment needs to improve the resiliency of these assets to natural disasters and extreme weather. Next slide, please. So for these, we are conducting this project following the following three main tasks. The first one is data gathering, where we sent data requests to each of the 6 stakeholder agencies and had one-to-one meetings. We requested data related to the asset condition and maintenance programs, budget, shortfalls, treatment costs, revenue forecast, and priority resiliency projects. So during July and August and the first part of September, we've been having these meetings and collecting as much data as possible, and we complemented this data with documents and external sources as well related to the topic. Now, as we were receiving this data and after concluding this data gathering, we've been analyzing these to identify gaps and trends, estimate performance outcomes based on scenarios, improve and identify opportunities for incorporating resilience improvement. And this is the task we are focusing on now. And today I'm presenting preliminary results. As soon as we conclude that, we're going to work on the development of the report for the RTP, and we're conducting several of these presentations to gather input from you all. Next slide. Okay, so in terms of the data and assumptions we've been using for the analysis so far, they are mainly coming from this data we requested to each stakeholder agency, including condition, maintenance, cost, and budget information. Now, after this effort, there are still some gaps, and so we fill those gaps, making informed assumptions based on official documents and external sources. Examples of these include the baseline spending coming from the 2050 RTP budget compiled by the Hillsborough TPO, and then from the 2022 FDOT Transportation Asset Management Plan and the HART Transit Management Plan, we got information such as the preservation unit cost, inventory data, and other important pieces from our analysis. And lastly, another example was we obtained information for the bridge inventory from the Federal Highway Info Bridge website. Next slide. Okay, so these and the next 2 slides will present the preliminary results from the payment asset needs, bridge asset needs, and resilience improvement needs. And for each of these, we define 2 scenarios. The first one is the trend spending, and then the performance spending, similar to what the previous presenter was describing. In our case, the trend spending is assuming the existing spending levels continue to 2050. And for the performance spending, we estimated what will be the additional funding needed to achieve the state of good repair, right? So in the case of the payment assets, the current spending is a total of 137 million annual for the region. And this existing spending level allows to treat about 27% of the roads in the network every 12 to 20 years. This range is because the different agencies had different targets on time between resurfacing. Now, another important clarification here is that this funding shortfall varies significantly across stakeholders. So for example, Hillsborough County resurfacing budget dropped nearly 80% between 2019 and today, which is, as you know, a significant factor when explaining this shortfall, right? Whereas an agency such as FDOT is in much better shape, and the shortfall is, or the gap is much smaller. Now, when estimating what's the additional funding to be able to resurface 100% of your roads in your network at the target range of years, so between 12 and 20 years, then that additional funding will be 87.6 million per year. Next slide, please. So in terms of bridge assets, the existing spending level is 23 million per year for bridge preservation. And this results in a funding shortfall of 86% of bridges achieving the goal of rehabilitation every 40 years. Again, we found that, these analyses were performed for each agency separately, and then we put together for a unique number for the region, right? But the shortfall varies significantly across stakeholders. We saw FDOT meeting their targets year per year, whereas Hillsborough County and other agencies having a bigger shortfall, mainly due to that drop in budget. Now, for the performance spending level scenario, the additional funding level to achieve the 100% of bridges achieving the goal, it was 3.6 million in this case. Next slide, please. All right, now this is showing the preliminary results for our resilience improvement needs. So in terms of, when I talk about resilience improvements, we look at projects related to stormwater management and also on projects related to road improvements that result in more resilient payments, right? And this includes, the treatments included here are hardening of the payment structure or a particular layer such as a subbase, raising the profile of the road, or treatments related to shoreline preservation. So in terms of these budget categories, the trend spending level shows that right now the allocated budget for stormwater project is 1.6 million per year, and for road maintenance is 82.3 million per year. Now, when we look at what's needed to improve the resilience improvements, we focus on the critical roads that are moderately to highly vulnerable. This came from a separate study, and there are 71 miles in the regions that were critical roads labeled as such, as moderately to highly vulnerable. So when estimating the budget needed to treat all of these 71 miles to improve its resiliency, we obtained that the needed budget is 14.8 million annually for storm water resilience improvements and 67.4 million for road resilience improvements. Next slide. Okay, so the main conclusions from this preliminary analysis are, in terms of the payment and bridge asset needs, that the overall current spending levels are insufficient to maintain the payment and bridge assets in the region at the target preservation cycles, and that the additional funding is 91 million annually to achieve these goals. In terms of resilience improvement needs, the current spending on stormwater improvements only accounts for 11% of the funding that's needed on the critical roads that are moderately to highly vulnerable. And also the funding needed to improve the resiliency of your payments on critical roads that are moderately to highly vulnerable is about 80% of the entire current road maintenance budget. So even if you make the decision of treat 100% of these critical roads, it's a very significant portion of your current budget. Next slide. All right, so in terms of next step, as I was saying, this is ongoing work. We were able to get these preliminary results, and now the very next step is we initiated discussions with each of the stakeholder agencies to validate all of our analysis assumptions and preliminary results. We started with FDOT, and we are doing it with the other agencies. Basically, as I was saying, every time we had a gap in our data, we made an informed assumption, but we're going back and reviewing our as necessary analysis to validating our assumptions. Then we are also conducting studies on return on investment for resiliency improvements for different projects. And we are documenting this work preliminary and results on the 2050 State of Good Repair and Resiliency Needs report. Next slide. Okay, so this concludes my presentation. Here we have the contact information of Connor McDonald, the TPO project manager, and my contact information. I will open for any question you may have today, but also feel free to send me an email, send Connor and myself an email if you have any other question.
Thank you, Connor. Excuse me. Thank you, Connor and Pedro. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question. When it comes to the stormwater for the roads, it says roads are vulnerable. What do we mean by that? Is it flooding, I guess, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah,
flooded.
exactly. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
You go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, okay, so yes, we are including, we identify these moderately to vulnerable roads as those that are on floodplain areas. So they're exposed to flooding events, and therefore stormwater improvements will improve the drainage of the area to reduce the chances of flooding. And yeah, and those are the one of the two components for improve the resiliency. The other one is raising the profile of the road or making it more resilient to the the recovery of that flooding event.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions?
I'm just trying to phrase or try to think about my question. I know under the pavement and bridge, you mentioned $91 million a year is what we would need to increase as a city and county. Just thinking about like the surtax, it felt like the surtax was pushing as if we had a lot more work to do than increasing to just $90 million a year. Trying to think what my question is, but it just seems like this estimate might be a little lower than what the surtax was always kind of pushing.
Right, I'm unfamiliar, to be honest with you, with the surtax is estimating. And I know that this number is recommended varying across agencies, right? So it's in order for Temple Terrace, for example, to meet that 12-year, it's a different amount. So that's the combined amount, I believe. But to be honest, I'm not familiar with how the surtax estimated, but I can look into that.
Do you mean that the surtax would be allocating more dollars, or will it be able to fund more roads?
I think this was my understanding that this, again, the surtax didn't pass, but it was to repave more often, to build trails, sidewalks, things of that nature. But it felt like we were pushing for more money in the surtax aspect of it compared to what we're showing here.
It's possible that the goal and the data with the surtax was pushing for a more aggressive resurfacing annually, but I'm not sure, so I can look into it.
And that did encompass more.
Yeah,
I think it encompassed more capital, like you just mentioned, trails and other facilities. You know, we would have brought in what Shaka was reporting on, and then I try to put all the surtax concepts in the back, put it in the history, move forward. But I think it also included like transit and other transportation efficiencies and practices, TDM. So it was much more elaborate.
So this is exactly what the revenue forecast study would be looking at, and what possible resources we will be having, and if some of them will not be for the next 5 years. So we're trying to time out and see how much and what category of money we will have. And I'll send you the calendar invite if you're interested in tuning into the presentation.
Okay. Yeah, share that with everyone, maybe. Absolutely. Thank you, Connor.
Thank you.
So the ask is for us to, this was just a status report. No action. I'm sorry. Thank you. Really appreciate you bringing that forth. And it opens up a discussion where it just helps put into perspective of looking at the current assets that we have and then the status of their repair. Right. Because, I mean, we just heard the presentation, the multi-millions that we're spending on technology to bring it in. But it also, we need to keep in mind that there's still infrastructure that needs to be maintained or restored to a state of good repair. And I really appreciate the work done here in order for that to remain in the conversation, that we can't just ignore it. So.
I think one of the takeaways for me too is it exposes how expensive it is to make things more resilient. You know, it building up, or, I mean, again, this is somebody that's not a transportation expert, but I mean, you know, from our side, we want to see everything become more resilient, but there is you're going to pay for it. And that shows it. I mean, they're talking $300 million extra over 20 years for 71 miles of road. It's a lot of money. But then when you break it down and you see what has to be done, it's not just repaving. And that's something, you know, when people say, build higher, build higher, it's, you know, it's not just snap fingers. There's a big cost involved, and I think this helps illustrate that.
And it's very real for us, because if you think about from a resiliency, fortunately, you know, Ian, it wasn't that far in our past, but it is a very good perspective to maintain, recognizing that it's not the wind that caused so much damage, it was a storm surge. And so when the water rises, of course, it comes in very high and very fast and very high, but what do? Where do you store the water? And then how quickly can it recede? So it all plays together, and it's really important. And along our roadways, I mean, that is pretty much the storm system, that, you know, that's where we're capturing a lot of water. We can hold it sometimes, just hold it there until, getting it off the road. So our transportation system can be restored much more efficiently. And then you let it dissipate as the tide goes out.
Right. And this needs
And then we
to,
treat it too. We need to keep it clean before it gets just, you know, discharged, sorry, before it gets discharged into the bay in our waterways.
and if I were to comment a little bit on that, it's the resiliency also measures criticality. So it's, for example, a high critical, high vulnerable roadway would be Bayshore Boulevard, right? So it's right on it's a high critical road for transportation and getting people and goods through that area, but it's also right on the bay, right? So that would be high critical, high vulnerable.
Right, yeah. Amazing, it's all connected. Thank you very much,
Thank
really
you.
appreciate that work and you leading it. Okay, so that brings us in the position of the agenda for old business and new business. Does anyone want to bring some topics up? Any topics of additional concern? Things you'd be looking forward to hearing about?
This will be the LRTP phase beginning of January, so you probably hear some more needs assessment.
Could you speak up? I don't know.
Yeah, sorry.
Can you guys hear her?
Oh, I was just saying that we'll still be in the LRTP phase next year, because the LRTP for 2050 will be adopted in the last quarter of 2024. So we will be still having some of these products you saw today, but we'll also be having some other needs assessments and the document production and other phases of it beginning of next year. So if you would like to see anything, please let us know.
Okay. Is anyone going to any conferences where there might be some subjects to bring forth? Did anyone go to, is it T3? I3?
I think.
I3? Anything that came out of that? Did anyone go to wasn't there a CAB conference?
The FAA,
yeah. Sorry. I haven't been in the conference mode for a while, and I didn't even go last night to the super session, so with my new position, I guess I will. No? Got you guys, come on. All right. Well, Vishaka will be annoying you, trying to pull some more ideas. So in your daily work, if you could, or when you're flipping through journals, you go to anything, and even the consultants in the room, if you see something that you think that the ITS committee might want to take note of on modern technologies, please bring it to us, or you've got my email address, you can contact me. Research also is a good place. There's some opportunities there, so, okay. Well, with that, the meeting is adjourned.
That was a good closing discussion.